Would you ask Mr. Meredith to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Meredith, ready to carry on?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Grange?
Yes, Mr. Meredith, thank you. We were talking about the BR135 classification just before the break, and I just another question on that. Is another reason why Kingspan didn't press for a BR135 classification report from the BRE that it would have made clear that the classification only applied to the specific system tested? Was that another reason why you didn't press for that?
I can see that can be considered advantageous in hindsight, but really it was my oversight at the time that I felt a classification report wasn't required, solely because I thought the results were easily interpreted based on the information in BR135. So that was my mistake. I can see how it could be considered that it was advantageous to the business, but that really wasn't the reason behind it.
Yeah. And just thinking back to the 2005 test, did Philip Heath actually attend that test? We looked at an email where you listed out those that would be present, and his name was on that list. But we wanted to check whether you remember Mr. Heath actually being at that test.
I don't know if he actually attended.
Okay.
It would be in the BRE's records. It'd be in the front of the report who attended on that day.
Okay, we can check. Thank you. So I now want to, staying on the topic of the 2005 test, look at how Kingspan used the data from that test in its marketing material. Can we go to KIN 3021738, which is an activity report number 5 of 2005 that you've written? We can see that at the top of the page. Do you see that there? Mm-hmm. Written on the 31st of May. Was this activity report written for your boss, Mr. Heath?
Yeah, this is my monthly report.
And it was drafted on the day of the test. Can you help us? Did you write both the passages in black and those ones in red? Was that all your writing? Is this ringing any bells, Mr. Meredith?
It's just the way it's set out. I'm just trying to read it if it is me that's actually written that, because it doesn't, the way it's written, it doesn't look like it was something that I'd written.
Okay.
It looks like an additional addendum to my
the red
report.
bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Just staying with the first paragraph at the top in black, you say there in the second sentence, so you report that there's been a full-scale 8414 test, and then you say, a successful test result will remove any limitations on its use in high-rise buildings above 18 metres, therefore increasing the market opportunities by at least 40% and giving us an edge above all other cellular plastic insulants used behind rain screen cladding. Mm-hmm. So is that a true reflection of the purpose for which a successful test was hoped to achieve?
This successful test would box off the question as to whether the material was or could be acceptable for use above 18 metres. It obviously doesn't highlight that there are limitations. It doesn't remove all limitations.
Yes, that was my question, because you say there...
Therefore, I mean, in hindsight, that's probably badly worded by myself.
Okay, you accept that?
Yeah.
Because it suggests that you can remove any limitations on its use. That's not right, is it? And you were aware at that time that a successful test would only mean that K15 could be used in that specific build-up above 80 metres. That's correct, isn't it?
The strategy was to present that information to the marketplace as a stepping stone for further testing.
Right.
You know, we accepted that it wasn't going to answer all the questions. It was showing that this is K15's story. If you're using other components, which they inevitably will be, they need to seek that guidance from the appropriate cladding manufacturers. We were hoping that this would bring other manufacturers to us to do further testing.
I see.
And then eventually expand our scope of application.
And where you say the strategy was to present that information to the marketplace as a stepping stone for further testing, whose strategy was that?
It was what was agreed between myself and my seniors as our only opportunity moving forward.
Yeah.
The marketplace wanted to use high-performance insulations, but we needed to demonstrate its suitability for use, but we were limited to the finances with regards to this because we weren't getting support from other cladding manufacturers.
Yeah.
And we weren't getting support from the BRE with regards to interpreting test results.
Yeah. If we look on at the red text, and I appreciate you're not entirely clear whether you would have written that, it says, hopefully you have a positive result to present in your report. This is the only major remaining application where rock mineral has been able to get us removed from specifications. Now, just on that, was that your understanding, that this was the only major remaining application where rock mineral was effectively out-competing Kingspan from being included in specifications?
I believe that to be correct, yes.
Yeah. And then it goes on, if I can pick it up in the fifth line, work will then continue with Zurich Municipal Insurance to get full acceptance of phenolic foam in facades and move to pushing Celotex out of the rain screen marketplace and any other PIR producers that are pushing product into this area. Further driving the point that when high-performance thermal and fire requirements are needed, phenolic is the product of choice. So again, would you agree that that was the objective that Kingspan was seeking to achieve, push Celotex out of this market?
We were looking to push the other, in what we considered inferior products, out of the marketplace, certainly.
Yeah. Now, after the May 2005 test, a flyer was produced by Kingspan entitled "What's Lurking Behind Your Facade?" to market K15 for use over 18 metres. If we can go to that at KIN 405350. This is the "What's Lurking Behind Your Facade" publication. And I want to look at the first paragraph that starts in the red text, so it's a bit below that, on that first page. And we just read it together. It says, Kingspan Cooltherm K15 rain screen board has not only been tested by the Building Research Establishment, BRE, and awarded certification to BS 8414 Part 1, but it has also been assessed and approved in accordance with BR 135. Now, can you agree with me that that was not the case, was it? It hadn't been assessed and approved in accordance with BR 135. Certainly not
We
by
had
the
personally,
BRE.
we'd assessed it in accordance with that document, but it's unfair to say it had been approved by the BRE.
And it implies that it had been assessed and approved by the BRE, doesn't it?
Yeah,
the way it's written.
it's badly worded.
The BRE complained about this flyer. Do you remember that?
I think I have a recollection of that, yes.
And the flyer had to be withdrawn. Let's just have a look at an email about that on the 8th of June 2006. Can we look at KIN 405179 and the first email there? This is an email you write to the technical services generic email address about K15 promotional literature. and you say, please note the K15 What's Lurking Behind Your Facade flyer has been withdrawn by the marketing department, partly because it's considered not a good sales tick to highlight the fact that you don't need class 0 below 18 metres. Also, the BRE have complained about the use of the word approved and certification in our text. These are privileges that would cost us an additional 20k. Therefore, when referring to this test method, please use the following text. And then you're proposing some different text to use. And the text you propose is then, Kingspan Cooltherm K15 has been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 1, and when assessed in accordance with BRE 135, it is acceptable for use above 18 metres in accordance with the English, Scottish and Irish building regulations. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Would you agree that this text that you propose also it's giving the impression that K15 has been assessed to BR 135? You say it is acceptable for use above 18 metres. Sorry, you say, and when assessed in accordance with BRE 135, it is acceptable for use above 18 metres. Do you see that in your wording?
What I'm trying to imply there is when it's cross-referenced with that other document, it's acceptable for use above 18 metres.
But assessed is ambiguous, isn't it, at best, there? It might imply to the reader that it's been through some sort of formal assessment process in accordance with BRE 135, doesn't it?
I would choose approved would be less ambiguous, but, well, to say if it was approved, it would be more, but I see what you're saying. I can understand where you're coming from, definitely.
Can you see now how that text might have been misleading and might have led readers to believe that there was a BR 135 classification report assessing that 8414 test against the pass-fail criteria in 8414?
Yeah, I don't think Kingspan ever intended to imply that there was a BR 135 report. It was just purely that the test results are meeting the requirements of. But yes, I can see now in hindsight that they are ambiguous.
That does require some form of expert assessment, doesn't it? Given that you've got to look at things like mechanical performance, the full test duration, has it reached the top of the rig? Mm-hmm. It isn't simply a question of reading off the thermocouple data, is it? It's more sophisticated than that.
But it is all there in the report. But yeah, I agree what you're saying.
Can you confirm that the text you suggested there was then regularly used in response to technical queries from customers?
I could imagine it was, yes. So I targeted this at the Technical Services Department.
Yeah. Going back to the complaint before this about the previous wording, do you know who it was at the BRE who complained about the content of the flyer, the previous flyer?
I don't know if it was Tony Baker.
Yeah. You think it could have been him?
I think it could have been him,
yeah. Yeah. I now want to ask you about the change in production at Pembridge from the old technology K15 to the new technology K15. If we can look at Mr. Heath's witness statement, this is at KIN 30200709 at page 13, paragraph 3.18. And I want to look about 3 lines down. He's dealing with this change in technology, and he says 3 lines down, it appears that K15 using new technology was first produced in Pembridge in or around September 2006 for certain product thicknesses. It appears that all thicknesses produced using old technology had been transferred to new technology by August 2007. Do you see that?
Yes.
And does that sound right to you in terms of your understanding of when the new technology K15 came on stream?
There was a transition where they agreed the standard operating procedures based on each thickness.
I now want to show you a letter very recently received by the inquiry from Adrian Pargeter at Kingspan. If you go to KIN 3024104, this is a letter of the 23rd of October 2020, so very recent, this letter. I take it you haven't seen this letter before today?
No.
It's addressed to Debbie Smith at the BRE, this letter, dated 23rd of October. And if we look at the second paragraph of page 1, pick it up at paragraph 1, he says, we're writing about a number of BS 8414 test reports and corresponding classification reports featuring K15, Cooltherm K15. And then in the second paragraph, he says, as you may be aware, Kingspan is currently involved as a core participant in the Grenfell Tower Public Inquiry. As part of our cooperation with requests for information from the inquiry, we have undertaken a comprehensive review of all past and current data which relates to K15, including 8414 tests. And then he says in the next paragraph, through our review, we have now concluded that tests carried out in 2005 and 2014 featured product that was not sufficiently representative of the product currently sold into the marketplace. We have listed these reports in a small summary of their construction build-ups below. And then if we go down to the table on page 1, the first entry on his list is the test 220876, the test that was carried out in May 2005 with no classification report. We see that on the left-hand side at the top of the table. And then if we go over to page 2, under this heading, test report 220876, 8th of December 2005. So that was the date of the test report for the May 2005 test. He says in the first paragraph that due to the age of the test, a lot of the details were hard to come by. And then if we look at the second paragraph, he says on a full review of raw materials and the manufacturing processes, it became apparent that the K15 manufactured in 2005 would not be representative of the product currently sold on the market from 2006 to today. While both products are still phenolic foams, Kingspan is now of the view that there are sufficient differences to consider withdrawing this test report. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So Kingspan are now telling us that the product tested in 2005 was so different from the product sold after 2006 through to today that it's withdrawing the test report, and it's writing to the BRE saying that. Now, would you agree that far from being something that Kingspan recently concluded, it was well known from September 2006 onwards that the 2005 test was undertaken with old technology K15? That's right, isn't it?
I think that was common knowledge, yes.
Yeah. And you were aware, weren't you, that the fire performance of the new technology product was different from the product tested in 2005, weren't you?
Yes.
You flagged that issue specifically to Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford more than once, would you agree?
Yes, that's definitely.
And I'm going to take you to some of those emails where you're raising concerns about the new technology K15 in a moment. Can you help us? Why did Kingspan continue to rely on the 2005 test data after September 2006 when the new technology was introduced?
It was very difficult, although I was constantly pushing back, trying to box out the formulations used and the different characteristics of the product. I was basically being told that the materials were the same, the new technology was essentially better. And in a lot of properties it was, but it performed differently in fire. I wouldn't say worse, it just performed differently.
You wouldn't say it performed worse?
No, I wouldn't say it performed worse, it just performed differently.
And were you given directions from your managers about this, about continuing to rely on the 2005 data, even though the product had changed?
The process that Phil alluded to, the actual completion of the SOP for the new technology, my impression was that went on for a couple of years. So they obviously procured the business, and then it took quite a while before old technology was phased out.
Did you feel comfortable telling customers that the K15 product that Kingspan was selling had been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 1?
I think I had concerns over the new technology, which I voiced. In hindsight, obviously now, definitely, without, I'm very sorry for what's happened, So this is, we perhaps should have perhaps been clearer in our marketing.
Okay. Well, we'll come on to the 2007-2008 tests in a moment. But just before we do, I want to look at some other things that were going on at the time. If we go to paragraph 9 of your witness statement at the top of page 5, and this very much picks up on the theme you've been talking about already today. At the top of that page, you say Kingspan tried on numerous occasions to obtain a bigger scope of application for K15 to 8414 parts 1 and 2. After performing indicative testing of K15 to 8411, exposed to the full fire load without cladding, we arranged a test behind a non-combustible building board. We did this as the BRE advised that if we tested behind a non-combustible building board, they would give us scope to say that the system tested could meet the BR135 requirements when used behind all non-combustible cladding types. Unfortunately, after testing successfully, i.e. meeting the BR135 requirements, the BRE moved the goalposts and retracted this statement, leaving us a little in the lurch. Now, we've been discussing this already, and you've explained to us that it was either Sarah Colwell or David Hoare that you'd had these discussions with about extended application of the test. Did you ever think to get that in writing from the BRE, given how important it was to Kingspan's strategy, that that's what the BRE were promising they could do?
I don't think I ever got any responses to Sarah Colwell's emails. I don't know if that's correct, me saying that or not, but yeah, I think I would have wanted that in writing after. I'd be shocked if I didn't try.
Yeah. When was it exactly, because it's not clear from your statement, when the BRE moved the goalposts and retracted this statement, leaving us a little in the lurch? Can you help us as to when that was?
Shortly after the 2005 full BS 8414 Part 1 test.
And who was it who retracted the statement and left you in the lurch at the BRE?
I would have thought it's Sarah Colwell, but then it could have been David Hoare, or it could have been Sarah's husband, Richard Colwell.
Right.
Who was working around the burn hall at the time.
I mean,
so obviously I was looking for them to steer me as to what we would need to test so we could get our scope of application, and it was them that pointed us down the non-combustible route. So we went out and sourced a non-combustible board, and then after the testing they didn't want to really know about it.
Right.
And they said that it was a verbal conversation, I believe, that they said that they didn't want to move that forward. And then myself and Phil went down at a later date and had a meeting with one of the directors of the BRE, quite a big meeting with lots of heavy hitters in there, and they started describing the number of different tests we would have to do just to get 5 different build-ups tested. Yeah. And this was where they were talking about 300 grand's worth of testing, and then they would know how many more tests we'd have to do to get a certification.
I see.
I think that was when Phil took the stance that, maybe we've done what we can. We need to put this out to the other component suppliers.
Right. So you go on in your statement here and you describe that meeting. You say, shortly after this, myself, Philip Heath, technical manager, and the director of Kingspan Offsite went to the BRE. Sarah Colwell and Tony Baker and the director of the BRE were in attendance, I believe, to attempt to obtain this when Kingspan launched the Offsite division that included about 5 different build-ups: lining, substrate, K15 insulation, cladding. The meeting became very heated as the BRE could not commit to a route to getting full and comprehensive certification for the systems to BS 84 parts 1 and 2. And then you say the meeting finished with the BRE stating that even after 15 tests at 8,000 test cost alone, they could not commit to being able to give Kingspan scope of application as they simply did not have the knowledge of these systems. This was very apparent as a lot of the tests we conducted, numerous BRE personnel would wish to witness the testing. All they could commit to was that after we conducted 250k of test work, they would hopefully be able to identify some extended application rules that would allow them to write something more comprehensive about the performance of the systems. So I think that's what you're describing in your statement. And can you be more precise about when that meeting, the one that became heated, when did that take place? Do you know?
It was sometime after the 2006 testing and before Kingspan Offsite performed their testing.
Yeah. Who was the director of Kingspan Offsite that attended with you? Can you remember?
Stephen something was the technical director. I know it was Anthony Wilkinson was the guy at my level that I was dealing with, but I can't remember the directors at that time, unfortunately.
Yeah. How did this meeting become heated? How did that happen?
Because the BRE didn't have answers to the questions. That they couldn't give us a line in the sand where they couldn't tell us what we needed to do to get certification or approval. It just wasn't possible. And that was where my boss, they were talking about 2 years budget for a product just to justify its use in the marketplace, and it was something that we weren't comfortable with at the time.
Yeah.
It was the expense, the resource, and the fact that there was no kind of line in the sand after we'd done that work. After we'd done that work, they would be able to come back to us and say where the position was then. They weren't going to say, definitely you could, you'd be acceptable for this or that. So
Yeah.
we were very, very disappointed that they couldn't answer any of our questions, basically.
Do you accept that even if at some earlier stage you thought that the May 2005 8414 test data could be used in a representative way, at this meeting the BRE made absolutely clear to Kingspan that this was not the view they took, and they were not prepared to extend the scope of that test?
At this point, we were looking at the test we did in 2005 and potentially the 5 system tests that Offsite were going to do. And we were looking to lump all those tests together, and then the BRE could present us their picture on that. But it was at that point that they kind of said, well, we need you to do a hell of a lot more testing. You're not going to get what you want. The only thing you can do at the moment is you test a specific system, and we will give you a classification for that system.
Yeah.
There was no flexibility, really.
Yeah.
So as a component manufacturer that has no allegiance to cladding system or framing system or range screen barrier type, we had no route to market apart from to simply present, this is what we have. You've got to go and speak to the other component manufacturers if you want full acceptability of use.
Yeah. I think the answer to the question I posed therefore is yes, that you did, certainly by this stage, understand that you couldn't be using that data in a representative way. Do you agree?
If I remember, I don't think I walked out of that meeting thinking that that data was irrelevant. But I did walk out of that meeting like Phil did. We were scratching our head as to the way forward, really.
Did you ever think or discuss with Mr. Heath that actually maybe K15 shouldn't be used on buildings above 18 metres at all?
In my earlier years at Kingspan, I was criticised for being very negative. That was the first feedback I'd ever got through my line manager from my director. So I tried to sit on some of my opinions a little bit because they weren't doing me any benefit to my career. It was my first job.
Yeah.
So I tried to be a little bit more positive about things. So my job was simply go out there and try and get what verification you could from the marketplace to verify that a system was suitable or a product was suitable.
So does it follow that you felt under pressure to find some way in which to justify the use of K15 over 18 metres?
I was continually under pressure for this. But this wasn't helped by the fact that the main certification bodies who'd we supported in getting the test method accepted and putting it out there weren't helping us really to promote their test methods.
Yeah. Would you agree that none of the marketing material put out by Kingspan refers to the specific system tested, including the cement particle board?
I requested an addendum to the literature which put the reader in contact with the technical department.
Yeah.
That if there was a building above 18 metres, they needed to speak to the technical department and go through the specifics with us. It was our intention to highlight to them at that point that they would, we didn't have all the answers. You needed to go out and source these from the other component manufacturers.
Yeah. Would you agree that the marketing material uses the generic wording non-combustible cladding in relation to that 2005 test to BS 8414? It doesn't refer specifically to cement particle board.
Yeah, I would agree that the literature says that, and in hindsight, it's an oversight, isn't it?
And technical queries also used the same wording, didn't it? Non-combustible cladding. It didn't descend into the particulars of the materials used, did it?
No, because we considered the 6mm cement particle board to be a worst case non-combustible cladding.
Right.
Any other non-combustible cladding would, you don't get a 6mm rain screen cladding of that type, so anything else would be considerably more resilient. So it was our belief that this was a kind of a worst case.
But you wouldn't have known, would you? Because you'd only done that one 2005 test. I think, as you mentioned earlier this morning, it's not until people started testing all manner of different exterior panels that people realise that it can have a very significant impact on the way it performs, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Let's just look at the Kingspan marketing literature. If we can go to KIN 403545, which is the 9th issue of the product literature for K15. Now, we can see that 9th issue in the top right-hand corner, March 2011. Are you aware that this issue was not actually updated until July 2016? Were you aware of that, or was that not something you would know? How long?
I kept sort of, I wasn't directly involved in the literature side of it. I may have been on the circulation for proofreading literature, but it was primarily the responsibility of the marketing manager.
Okay, yeah.
We were there to advise and present the new test evidence when we had it, but like I said, I was that busy. I just, things like this just floated past in the day-to-day, really.
Okay. If we look on the third bullet point on that side, it's been highlighted in yellow there. In this version, the first bullet point, it says successfully tested to BS 8414/2002, can meet the criteria within BR 135 and is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's a claim about K15 as a product, isn't it?
Yes.
And would you agree with me, looking at that now, that that statement is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres is wholly misleading? It doesn't say that it's only suitable for use above 18 metres in one specific configuration, does it?
No.
And I note also under BS 8414, it doesn't tell you whether it's tested to 8414 Part 1 or Part 2, does it there?
No.
And if we go
I
to
think
page...
that would be a typo. I don't think that was deliberately done.
Okay. If we go to page 2, under typical constructions, these are typical design details. Look at these typical constructions first. So you see figure 1, insulated rain screen cladding systems. And then if we go down, insulated rain screen cladding systems, terracotta clay tile external finish. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So the first one's a non-proprietary external finish. The second one's a terracotta clay tile external finish. And then the third one is insulated rain screen cladding systems on a steel frame. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And these typical design details are not said to apply only to buildings under 18 metres in height, are they?
No.
And as at March 2011, when this marketing material was issued, K15 had not been tested as part of an external facade system clad in terracotta clay tile panels, had it?
Sorry, what date was this again?
March 2011.
No, it hadn't been tested.
And by this time, K15 had been tested on a steel frame system 4 times. And it's right, isn't it, that not one of those tested systems could achieve the pass criteria in BR 135. That's right, isn't it?
This is including the tests done by Offsite. Yes, that's correct.
And moving down to page 6, under the heading Fire Performance, in the top right-hand corner, if we can zoom in on that, it says Kingspan cool foam rain screen board and its rigid thermoset insulation core are class 0 as defined by the building regulations. And then it says, when subjected to the British standard fire test specified in the table below, has achieved the results shown. And then below that, it says Kingspan cool foam K15 rain screen board in the construction specified in the table below, when subjected to the British standard fire test BS 8414, fire performance of external cladding systems, test methods for non-load-bearing external cladding systems applied to the face of a building, has achieved the results shown. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then that sounds as though it might qualify the specific construction, but if you see below, the construction just says 6mm non-combustible cladding fixed to an aluminium rail system. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And those were the generic terms used, which I was asking about earlier, weren't they? Just to refer to it as non-combustible cladding.
Yes.
And then on page 6, on the right there, under result, it says the tested product meets the criteria stated within BRE 135, fire performance of external thermal insulation for walls of multi-storey buildings, and is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres in accordance with the building regulations and standards. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And would you agree with me, looking at it now, that that's misleading, isn't it? The product on its own can't meet the BR 135 criteria.
It does say cool firm K15 rain screen board in the construction specified when subjected to meets the following. I agree with your comments, but also they have tried to make clear the scenario here that it's just based on this specific construction.
I see. But it doesn't really go far enough, does it? It certainly doesn't say that the product can only be used in that specific situation, does it?
No, definitely not.
And that statement that K15 was suitable for use with any non-combustible cladding system was made by Kingspan on many occasions after 2005, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were under the... I think that information had been released to the sales department, and I don't think we were able to claw it back after we told them, I think.
Yeah. On the basis of that 2005 test, Kingspan continued to assert for many years that its product could be used on buildings over 18 metres, didn't it?
Yes.
And would you agree that this was despite the test not being representative of a rain screen cladding system and only being on a masonry substrate, and even more fundamentally, Kingspan changing its product so that what was sold to market actually performed worse in fire, didn't it?
To some fire tests, it performed worse, yes.
Yeah. And as a result, K15 ended up on many hundreds of high-rise buildings, didn't it?
I believe so, yes.
When it shouldn't have been anywhere near those buildings, should it?
It should have been dependent on construction.
It should have only been on buildings with that one specific system specified, shouldn't it?
I think I'd have to look back at some of the letters we wrote as part of this to support that, but I thought we were kind of clear in saying that this wasn't the final hurdle that you have to pass. This is just showing that the K15 can meet.
I see. Okay.
I mean, there's intention and there's how it was implied in the marketing literature, which is maybe a little bit more misleading.
Okay. Yeah. I will take you to some of those letters. So now looking at the testing, I want to move on and just look at the testing you did in 2007 and 2008. Now, you say in an email in 2008, which we'll go to shortly, that 80% of the market was out of bounds to Kingspan and K15 unless you could pass a BS 8414 Part 2 test, given the preference for steel frame build-ups. Do you agree?
Yes, that's the case.
And so would you agree it was critical that Kingspan obtain and K15 obtain favourable fire tests on steel frame systems in order to retain Kingspan's share of the high-rise market?
That was one of the goals, yes.
At this stage, and after the successful 2005 test, do you recall what share of the over 18 metre market Kingspan occupied, approximately?
I would have only put that sort of information in my reports. I would have got it off a sales manager or the sales director or something. I'd not really au fait with sales, to be honest.
Yeah. Let's look now at the 8414 Part 2 test that you undertook in partnership with Metsec, steel frame manufacturers, and Sotec, who made aluminium cassette rain screen cladding on the 20th of December 2007. if we can look at the executive summary you prepared after the test, at KIN, if we go to KIN 408847, and this is dated the 7th of January 2008. This is you can see in the middle, a strictly confidential executive summary version paper that you produced. There's your signature and name at the bottom. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And if we can go to the second page and the second paragraph, under the heading Project Stakeholders, sorry, it's the third paragraph there, it says, under Project Stakeholders, you say that it's a jointly run project with SOTEC and METSEC and Kingspan, cost split 3 ways. And then in the next paragraph down, you say, this information is essential to Kingspan for all facade sales above 18, I think you mean 18 metres, not 18 millimetres, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Throughout the UK and Ireland, not having evidence that our product performs onto a steel frame is causing job losses, specifically in Scotland on a daily basis. However, we are fighting the case for each project with the BS 84141 onto masonry test data performed in 2005. So do you agree that at this stage, test data from 8414 Part 2 was desperately needed in order that you could say that K15 could be used on steel frame structures?
At that point, the market was suggesting that we needed a Part 2 test. Well, that's what I felt strongly about anyway.
Yeah. And you say in your witness statement to the inquiry that you were present at this test on the 20th of December 2007. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And if we look under test date on this same page, it says there, originally 14th of December, then it moved to the 17th, and then at the last minute they switched it to the 20th of December. I was on holiday from the 15th, and Mark Swift was to attend on the 17th. However, he didn't make the 20th, but we will soon have the DVD of the test, and we performed a full dissection on Tuesday, so we're happy that we know exactly what happened. Do you see that there?
All right, okay.
So this seems to suggest that you were on holiday as the date changed. And then the test witnesses are listed. If we go below this, we see there's a heading test witnesses. It's John Eggington, SOTEC, James Gallagher,
Yeah.
here, METSEC, Tony Baker, Sarah Colwell, Phil Clark, BRE. Do you see that?
I actually witnessed the previous test, which was a failure on a non-combustible insulent.
Yeah.
That was where I'm getting confused, sorry.
Yeah. And then if we go to page 6 of your executive summary, this same document, and look at the heading, the tested system, at the top of that page. There, in the first paragraph, you say, following much discussion, we agreed on a system that we and the BRE believed had the best chance of passing. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, when you say we agreed on a system that we and the BRE believed had the best chance of passing, who within Kingspan was involved in those discussions?
This is, the we would be myself, John Eggington from SOTEC, the chap from METSEC who escapes me, and maybe Phil Clark or David Hoare. And it was to do with the position of the fire barriers.
Yeah.
Really, that was obviously, I think they were still learning with this test, and there was an optimum position for fire barriers to give it, to be representative of what's used floor to floor and to actually meet the requirements.
Right.
I think you could deviate the height of the fire barrier, and I think, I don't know, it might suggest that there'd be a better chance of passing if the fire barriers were slightly higher.
Slightly higher than the floor level? Or slightly higher than what?
Slightly higher than the aperture. So
I see.
The window aperture. But this is, we're spending big money on this, and we're pushing everyone in the laboratory to give us their feedback on, what they think works and what doesn't.
Yeah. So I think what you've just said there is that members of the BRE were trying to help you design this test so it had the best chance of passing. Would you agree?
Yeah, they were being helpful, I think.
And what involvement did Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford have in this test?
Because this system was very much a SOTEC system as such, the insulation incorporated in it, we were restricted to installing it in the pattern that we normally install our insulation, with the fixings that we normally install, with the tape that we normally use. So the design of the system was very much a SOTEC, because it was basically, we were testing their cladding with the Kingspan product within it.
Yeah. And who selected the K15 insulation that was sent to the BRE for the test? Did you do that?
I think I just requested product from our production department.
Yeah.
So it'd been Gwyn or Doug or something like that.
Yeah. And by this time, that would be new technology, orchestra end technology K15, wouldn't it?
I should imagine so, yes.
Yeah. And this was the first large-scale fire test on new technology K15, wasn't it?
I think it was, yes.
And the thickness of the foil facer that was used, that would be a perforated foil, wouldn't it?
It would be a perforated foil, yes.
If we just look at the spreadsheet that we looked at earlier, KIN 3022357, and we look at major changes. And we want to look in the 6th column on page 1, relating to the 2007 test. If we go down this page, and again, and again. Actually, I think I might have a wrong reference there. I'll come back to that. Let's go to your report. Back to your report again, KIN 408847. At the bottom of page 2 now, under the heading Result. We'll go to page 2. And we can see there you say this. By 17 minutes, the top fire barrier had breached and the raging inferno moved up to the top thermocouples and pushed them past 600 degrees, thus failing the simple criteria of BR 135. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then if we go over the page to the top of the next page, page 3, you say the phenolic was burning on its own steam and the BRE had to extinguish the test early because it was endangering setting fire to the laboratory. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then in the 3rd paragraph you say this, under the heading, why did it fail? You say the new technology phenolic is very different in a fire situation to the previous technology, which has passed several similar tests. The old technology would turn into a light ash and fall away, leaving to substance to feed the fire.
I think it's supposed to be leaving no substance to feed the fire if it falls away. Sorry, that's my
thank
typo.
you. Please refer to archive test pictures 47 and 48, which clearly shows this. We'll come back to those. And then you say this, the phenolic burnt very ferociously and gave the top cavity barrier a serious hammering. It did, however, hold out, and there was a slim chance that it may have held out long enough for the crib to start burning down, and then this test would have been successful. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, would you agree that it became clear to you very quickly that this new K15 could not repeat the fire performance of old technology K15?
There's two things at play here. There's my first experience of an aluminium cladding system, which I'd not seen before. And obviously there is the performance of the new phenolic, which I'd not seen before either.
Yeah.
So, and because of this system, it kind of, the the metalwork buckled, producing a chimney which kind of flapped in front of the cladding, allowing it to leap over the fire barriers, which allowed a large fire to develop, which allowed the phenolic to become fully involved in the test. I was shocked, as you can see by my words, that the phenolic was burning ferociously. I think, there, like I say, there's two things at play. There's the cladding, which is causing partially the fault of failure, and there is also the new phenolic, which I believe was improving. As I believe there was work being done to the ovens at the time, I was told, to actually improve the performance of the phenolic. And there was talk of fire retardants being added, or agents being added to improve the material. So this is what I wanted from this. So that's probably why I sent a very animated report around to my superiors to make sure that they were aware that I wasn't really overly pleased with the new version from this test's perspective.
Yeah. Would you agree that one of the things you were particularly surprised about was that the phenolic was burning on its own steam, as you record here?
Yeah, because I was brought up with those frequently asked questions, answers, where I was told that it would not contribute to fire growth and would die out under its own steam.
Yeah.
So this was quite shocking for me and the other guy that attended, I believe.
Yeah. You go on page 3 to record your observations on why the test failed and what improvements could be made for future success. And you note, if we go 8 paragraphs down, at the bottom of that screen, as we can currently see it, can you see there's a heading, it begins perforations in the phenolic foil. Can you see that?
Yes.
And you say, perforations in the phenolic foil faces have caused a reduction in the Euro class when tested in the SBI, the single burning item.
Yes.
Loss of the perforations may help, ? You see that there?
Yes.
Can you help us? So you were obviously aware that the perforations had reduced the Euro class when tested under the single burning item test. When had you done those tests and what was the level of reduction?
I felt this was a hypothesis of mine. I felt if I take you back to the old technology, when I tried to test that to the Euroclass, the SBI, what actually happened was the material would initially flash fire and then it would drop, a light ash would fall and it would block the flame, so it would sort of auto-extinguish the crib in the SBI test. So it would create a void test. So it was actually impossible to get a Euroclass, as far as I was aware, on the old technology. So when the new technology, it tended to remain more integral, it held together, and because it was there, it glowed, and obviously if the flames were continuous, then it would at some point become involved in the fire. But you could see in this test that, and you can see on the pictures of that terrible building, that there's still pink foam on the outside of the building where it's only a surface char. The material hasn't become fully involved. You need to introduce quite a lot of heat to actually get the product to go up. So, although I still believe a lot of the information that I was given about K15, that it is it's one of the better combustible insulants in the marketplace.
Back to my question, had you actually got formal SBI testing done for the new technology foam, and what classification did it achieve?
I think it was Euroclass C.
Right. But would you agree, looking at that sentence that I just read to you, or the two sentences, that you clearly think at this time that the perforations may well have caused a worsening of its fire performance? That seems to be what you're speculating about at the time.
I considered that a possibility, yes.
And did you ever carry out investigations into why that might be?
We thought it was potentially ignition of the blowing agent.
Because the perforations allow the ignition of the
Yeah.
blowing agent more readily, is that right?
More readily. But like I say, it was a hypothesis that was never really proven. Although I lobbied for a foil face and unperforated version on the one side, it was impossible to manufacture the product in that way. So I just had to test what I was given, which was the perforated version.
Did you discuss the effect on fire performance of the introduction of perforations with anyone else within Kingspan at this time?
I would have discussed it at the monthly technical meeting. It was my current thinking, so I would have discussed it with all my colleagues.
Yeah. If we go to the paragraph below, that one that we were just read, you say this, you say, in all honesty, from what I've seen, the way the phenolic burned is of the most concern. Therefore, we need to add a fire retardant, which could also help us get class 0. Do you see that there?
Yes.
What was the reaction from Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford to the news that this test had become a raging inferno and performed so badly?
I can't remember their exact reactions. It might have been that this was potentially the fault of the cladding system at the time.
Yeah.
I can't remember any real sort of shock. But this was the first time. These were pioneering tests for Kingspan. You know, they hadn't been performed before, so there was nothing similar done in Europe at the time.
We can see that you're clearly concerned about the way the phenolic burned. Did Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford share your concern about the fire performance of the new technology K15 at this time?
Like I say, I think this might have been the time that I was criticised for not being very positive about our products, or sorry, the Kingspan products.
So does it follow that you didn't think your managers were concerned or concerned in the same way?
I don't think
as
they
you?
were concerned in the same way as me. No.
Yeah.
I felt a tremendous responsibility for this because the buck stopped with the technical department to make sure that it was suitable for the marketplace, and we had to do the testing.
After you wrote this, and obviously this report was delivered to the technical team, did you feel at the time that your concerns about the fire performance of new technology, K15, were being taken seriously by Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford?
I felt like I wasn't never heard, actually, when it came to issues like this.
Did you actually have conversations with them, as well as writing this, in which you said, I'm really concerned about how K15 performs, given the testing we've just done, how it performs in fire? Did you have those conversations with them?
We were always, there was always a new solution on the horizon. We could try this or we could do this. So I was constantly being, you know, there was something around the corner that could help us move forward. So I guess I was always hoping that would be the end of it. Really.
But do you actually have a specific recollection of raising concerns with them?
I raised concerns on numerous occasions when it came to new technology.
Yeah. About its fire performance?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you didn't think you were listened to, is that what you're saying?
I might have been listened to, but they certainly didn't respond to it.
And you said earlier that you thought it was around this time that you were criticised for being too negative. Who was it who criticised you for being too negative?
It would have been the managing director.
So who's that? Malcolm?
Peter Wilson.
Peter Wilson. Okay.
But that came secondary through my line manager.
Okay. Now, keeping with this document, underneath what you've written are comments from the BRE. We can see that at the bottom of that page. If we could go down the page and look at those. So here we can see it's written, comments from the BRE, the official line, it's a system failure, no individual component can be solely held responsible for the failure. However, unofficial comments, it was apparent that the insulation was fully involved in the test. Surface spread of flame was apparent and the core continued to burn when the flame source had been extinguished. They stated they did not remember the product performing like that last time. Do you see that there? Mm-hmm. Who was it from the BRE who made these unofficial comments that you've recorded here?
I feel it was Phil Clark. He was the most easy to talk to, and he was constantly available to discuss testing with. So
Yeah.
He was always there. The other people, although we'd request the presence of Sarah Colwell, Tony Baker, those sort of people, they only, came in quickly just to witness the test from the back of the room.
Yeah. Was anyone at the BRE at this time aware that the product tested on the 20th of December 2007 was a different one from the product that had been tested in 2005?
I think I might have discussed this with Phil Clark, because I was looking to see, I was looking to see his opinion on what he thought, really. I needed to glean as much information from him as possible, so I was quite open with him.
Right. And you say I might have discussed it. How sure are you that you did discuss it?
I'm sure I told him something about our new technology in our ovens along the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, but other than Phil Clark, was there anyone else at the BRE that you remember discussing or informing of that?
I might have voiced it to Tony Baker because we were obviously the end goal, especially with the introduction of the Kestrel technology, we were looking to spend lots of money so we could justify potentially certification for K15, and that's what I wanted really, was something that would ensure the formulation remained constant, and we had visiting certification bodies who would come in and make my life easier a bit and make sure that we stuck to our formulations.
Yeah. Now, you've included in your executive summary photographs from the 2007 test, as well as some photographs from the 2005 test. Just want to look at those now. If we can look on page 7 of this report. I think we can see there the K15 Sotec Metzec system that was tested on the 20th of December 2007. And we can see the clock on the right there shows 13 minutes and 1 second. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And so that's the rig at 13 minutes into the test. And then if we go on to page 9, the next page of the report's blank, but if we then go to page 9, we can see the test at almost 14 minutes, 13 minutes 57. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then if we go to page 10, that's 15 minutes in. And then at page 12, we go, and it's a bit faint, but I think we can see it's 17 minutes and 43 seconds. And it's almost at the top of the rig by that point, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
And we know from your summary that the top fire barrier was breached around the 17-minute mark. Now, if we could put side by side with that photograph, the photograph on page 21 from the 2005 test, if we can do that. So on the right, we can see the old technology phenolic test, 2005. Do you see the caption at the bottom? And
Yeah, this is the naked test, isn't it? I think.
is it?
It looks like it. There's no cladding system in there, is there?
I see.
And there's no fire barriers either.
I see. So that's 25 minutes in on that test.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
And you can see what I was saying there, that it just fell away. It didn't move up.
I see. So is this what you're doing by including these photographs in the report, is it? Is to try and illustrate
The difference in the materials.
the difference in the way the K15 was performing?
I mean, to give a fairer picture, I should have put the picture of the test failure that was that happened a week before with the mineral wool installation, because I believe that failed in a similar manner.
Right.
Although not quite as dramatic, it was still the cladding melted and the fire jumped up the side of the facade.
Yeah. And if we carry on with photos of the 2007 test, once the crib's been extinguished, if we go to page 13 now and just look at that. So these are photos you've included. This is, you can see 36 minutes and 10. Do you see that? This is after it's been extinguished.
Yes.
And then page 14, you're including pictures, close-up pictures then of the insulation after the test. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And then if you look at page 16, that shows the damage to the front of the rig and also the wing wall. Can you see that there?
Yes.
And if we can contrast that with the photo on page 22, which I think was what you were trying to achieve in the report from the 2005. If we can put those two side by side, that one and page 16, 22 and 16 side by side. Now this time, that page on the right, page 22, isn't that the test you did do in 2005 with the non-combustible cladding board on it?
Yes, that's correct.
And we can see the difference there between the test on the right and the test on the left, yes?
Yes.
Now I appreciate they're not directly comparable because one's on a masonry substrate and one's on a steel frame substrate, but again, were you including these pictures in order to give the reader a flavour of how different the performance had been of the K15 in the 2007 tests?
Yes, definitely.
We talked about your concerns just a moment ago. Was one of your concerns that at this point that what Kingspan was actually selling to the public was potentially dangerous in terms of its performance in fire? Was that one of your concerns?
I'd say certainly, yeah.
Did you ever give consideration or discuss with anyone else within Kingspan whether sales of K15 should be halted immediately and the product recalled from the market?
I think, like I said before, the product was going through an evolution from old technology to new technology. So I was always being sort of suggested that, we just need to box out these issues and the better variant will be round the corner potentially. But no, I never discussed that it should be we should not have it in the marketplace. I kind of sat on my hands with that a little bit. I was the bottom of the rung. I was already told not to be too negative, so I was just going with the flow a little bit, I'm afraid to say.
Were you aware of anybody else considering that question within Kingspan, whether it should be removed from sale, given how differently it was performing?
Nobody that was talking to me.
Okay. We'll come back to talk about Class Naught much later, probably tomorrow, but in your report we saw that you said, let's add a fire retardant to the product. What was the response to that suggestion?
I think my suggestion for a fire retardant was it came from the R&D people, because I was looking at, obviously we weren't successfully able to repeat the Class O results that we had on the Kestrel technology. So I was just trying to be comprehensive and, say, okay, well, if we needed it for Class O, it would be a benefit for this situation as well.
Yeah.
To try and add a bit of weight to the argument, really, that we needed to do something.
Okay. Had any fire retardants been added to samples of K15 for testing before this time, to your knowledge?
Not as far as I'm aware. Like I say, my chemistry is not brilliant, and I'd been told that fire retardants had been added to PIR to modify the viscosity of the material. It wasn't specifically for adding fire retardancy. So, like I say, I'm not up on the chemistry, really.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think that would be a good moment for a break, because I'm moving to the
Well,
next
you're going to a new
test.
topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, then we'll have a short break. We'll have a short break now, then, Mr. Meredith. We'll come back at 25 to 4, please. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence. All right? Thank you very much. Right, 25 to 4, please. Thank you. Yes, would you like to ask Mr. Meredith to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Meredith, all right. Thank you. Yes, Miss Grange?
Yes, thank you. Now, moving forward with the story, it's right, isn't it, that on the 1st of April 2008, there was another large-scale fire test with Sotec aluminium panels and a Metsec steel frame. That's right, isn't it?
This is the one that we were just looking at the photos of, yeah?
No, that was from 2007. And this one is now 1st of April 2008.
Yeah, there was 2 tests in the programme originally.
Yep.
There was a mineral wool test and then a phenolic test. Both those first 2 tests failed.
Yes.
The test was repeated with mineral wool only.
Yep.
On Sotec's request. We could see that there were issues with the Sotec material for starters.
Right.
You know, it failed with a non-combustible insulant. So, you know, we could see that would be something that we'd have to not be used with, really.
So that test was also a fail, wasn't it? 1st of April 2008.
Yeah.
I now want to move on to some testing that was undertaken in partnership with Kingspan Offsite, that subsidiary company of Kingspan, on the 9th of April and the 6th of June 2008 using K15. If we can go to an internal email chain within Kingspan, this is at KIN 408843, and I want to start at the bottom of page 2. There's an email right at the bottom there at 9:37 on the 9th of June from you to Malcolm Rochford and Vincent Coppock, copying in Philip Heath and Gwyn Davis, and the subject is K15 problems. Do you see that there?
Yes, I see the top of it anyway.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll go to the body of it, and then we go over the page, and we can see that you say this: the question of K15's bad fire performance is no longer just an internal one. It would seem Offsite had a very dramatic test failure. Therefore, I need to know how soon I can have samples of the OP90 phenolic for business critical R&D. Is that research and development?
Yes.
Yeah. Once I've reviewed the information, I will provide a more comprehensive report later. However, the attached picture shows the most recent K15 test performed by Offset and K15 burning under its own steam 10 minutes after the test was put out. Offsite are gravely concerned that we are selling something that doesn't do what we say it does. And then he says, to validate the new product from a fire point of view, I'd need samples of the following, and then you set out some various requirements for the new testing. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
Now, when you say there it's no longer just an internal one, i.e. the problem with K15 and its bad fire performance is no longer just an internal one, do you say that there because it was already a matter which was known internally within Kingspan, including to Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, on the face of this document, it appears that you had serious concerns about the performance of the product. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
And the views of Philip Heath and Malcolm Rochford, is your answer the same as the answer you gave earlier about what their views were of how concerning this was?
I think they were listening to me and looking for solutions. But I don't remember anything. You know, they weren't as concerned. I didn't feel they were concerned as concerned as I was.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask, did they know about what's described here as a very dramatic test failure? Did they know about that?
Yes, I think they're on this email chain.
Yeah, they would have been they would have had their opposite numbers in that part of the business, probably would have communicated this to them as well, and I'm not privy to it. But I obviously informed them of this. So as far as I was aware, this was the first time they were hearing about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they knew about it already.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's great.
When Kingspan Offsite asked if Kingspan was selling something that doesn't do as we say it does, that's what you've said there at the end of the third paragraph, was anyone at Kingspan Offsite aware that the 2005 test had used a different version of K15?
I don't think so.
Yeah. You don't think Kingspan Offsite were aware that it was a different product?
No.
No. We can see that you're asking for samples of an OP90 product in the second sentence there at the top of that page.
Yep.
I need to know how soon I can have samples of the OP90 phenolic for business critical R&D. What's OP90 referring to?
This was one of the latest considered modifications of the Kestrel technology. I think it might have been a fire retardant or an additive that was being considered by Vincent, that was being talked about as a possible inclusion.
I see.
So I was trying to push for this to be available. Let's do a trial. Once they'd done a trial and I would put it through that testing regime that I'd stipulated, I'd be able to formulate, our best route forward, really.
Yeah, I understand. So if you got a product with a fire retardant added to it, you could do some testing and see how far that got, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. In the last paragraph of this email, you say, in respect of using just one perforated side on the structural foil-faced PFs, that's phenolic foams, it was agreed at the meeting that this could happen, but how do we put it in place and make sure it happens? Is this a PPDS situation? Does anyone know the cost implications? So what you're also suggesting there, is this right, that you might also test using one perforated side and one unperforated side?
This was something I desired, and in technical meetings it was said that this was a possibility, but I don't think they could actually manufacture it when they tried.
Were you keen to return to an unperforated foil facer from a fire safety
I
point
wanted
of view?
something that would comfortably meet the requirements.
Yeah. If we go to another email in the same string, this is KIN 403704. If we look at the top of page 1 on the 9th of June 2008 at 9:22 a.m, it's within the string K15 problems. This is Philip Heath to Malcolm Rochford to you, Vincent Coppock, copying in Gwyn Davis. We can see, he says, Ivor, I think it's important we see the fire test report from Offsite whilst also looking at the facade assembly, cavity widths and materials adopted within the test rig. And then he says this, any response to Offsite on this matter should be run past myself before it is sent to the outside world. As you know, Offsite are extremely reactionary. And then he says, with regards to their comment that we are selling something that doesn't do what we say it does, what statements are they referring to? Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, what did you understand him to mean when he said Offsite are extremely reactionary? He's obviously concerned about whatever response is sent to them.
Yeah, Offsite would include any material that would help them sell their system, and they would often use a non-combustible mineral wool type insulant. I know Phil and others in Kingspan felt this was not running with the Kingspan way, really. If you're going to sell a Kingspan system, it needs to include a Kingspan insulation. So I think he was concerned that the Offsite leg of the business might not have been solely on the same page as the rest of the business.
I see. So are you saying that Kingspan Offsite were testing a system which didn't have the Kingspan insulation as part of it, and what we're passing that off.
No, not at
No.
all. No. What I'm saying is, Kingspan, they would use, they'd have no issues with using a mineral fibre insulant in their wall system.
I see.
And marketing it as having a mineral fibre insulant in their wall system. But
Yeah.
Phil and others in Kingspan believe that if you're selling a Kingspan system, it needs to have Kingspan insulation in there. He was a bit kind of, like many of us, offended by the fact that they would seek to use something else when really they should be sticking with their own.
Right. Yeah. And in the meantime, Malcolm Rochford has responded to you. If you look at the email below that, on the 9th of June at 9:42, if we can go below that to that email, he says to you, please expedite this trial. Ivor, if you're confident that old process will pass the test, we may have no choice but to provide old process K15 for Offsite until the FR issue is sorted out. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then he says, Gwyn, I know this is a nightmare for processing, but we can't carry on providing something that we know fails a fire test. So it is what he's referring to there, that you might have to make a batch of old technology, K15, to provide to Offsite for the fire testing.
Not just for the fire test, he's talking about providing old process K15 to Offsite.
Generally,
yeah.
I see.
That's what he's angling at there.
I see.
The thing is, there's a battle going on here. There's a transition that they're changing the technology from old to new, and this is not going to be good news to the processing manager that we're trying to go back towards old technology. So, he's going to want to focus on new technology, and we need to get new technology sorted, not old technology. So
Right, yeah.
it's quite an emotive comment there by Malcolm, but it's a fair comment as well.
Which bit are you saying is the emotive comment? That can't provide carry on.
Well,
provide
he's saying
something?
that you can't provide something, which is true. You've got to provide the right solution for the job. So it does mean it's going to be a nightmare for production to have to produce old technology one day and new technology the next.
Yeah.
But if that's what the market needs to sell that product, then that's what we were going to have to do.
Right. But you didn't take him to be saying that actually new technology K15 shouldn't be being provided to anybody, not just Offsite, to anybody. He says we may have no choice but to provide old process K15 for Offsite.
Until the fire. Could you rephrase the question again, please?
Yeah, so I think you said it's quite an emotive comment by him that we can't keep providing a product that we know fails. But isn't it a fair reading of his emails that what he's saying is we can't provide old process, or we've got no choice but to provide old process K15 to Offsite until the FR issue is sorted out?
Sorry. The emotive nature is the upset to the production process by providing new technology one day and old technology the next.
Right,
so
I see.
to satisfy Malcolm's desire that we provide old technology K15 to Offsite, or maybe to the market until the FR issue is sorted out, that's going to be a nightmare for our production teams. That's why I said that was emotive.
Yeah. Mr. Rochford has said in his witness statement that he was concerned that new technology K15 was not supplied to customers if the fire performance was inferior to old technology. Did you understand him to mean that, or to understand him to say that on another occasion? That he was concerned that it wasn't supplied to customers if the fire performance was inferior?
I don't know what that refers to apart from this particular issue here.
Yeah, he says this is why I responded in this way in this email. He's saying that in this email he's expressing a concern about providing it to customers. And what I'm asking is, when you received this email, is that how you understood it?
Yeah, I thought, to be honest, reading it now, I think I might have thought that he was just talking about, let's make sure Offsite receive this product for their testing and maybe for their ongoing purchases until we can iron out the issues.
Right.
So I don't, this would have caused a lot of trouble, this email, really. So I think they battled it out between them as to what they were going to supply going forward.
Yeah. Just putting this email to one side for the moment and just thinking generally, did Mr. Rochford ever raise any concerns with you about supplying customers with new technology K15, given the fire risk it posed?
I don't think, as far as I recollect, Malcolm didn't raise issues with me. It would be me raising issues with him. I would always go to him with my problems, not vice versa. So I can't recollect, unfortunately.
Okay. Let's go now to another email chain from the 9th of June 2008. So this is KIN 3020913. And this email chain that we were looking at continues. And I want to look on page 5. We see at the bottom there the email from Mr. Rochford that we were just looking at, and then immediately above that there's an email from Gwyn Davis at 10:09 where he says, Ivor, please confirm that the old process passes the test, as I was under the impression that the old KO15 100mm trial I made a few weeks ago was no better either. Do you see that there? So is old KO15 100mm trial that he made a few weeks ago, is that a reference to remaking old technology K15?
I don't know, and this could be for any number of tests, so I'm not sure what this was for, unless this was no, I don't know.
Let's look at your response, if that helps. If we go up to page 4, we can see your response at 18:01 on the 9th of June. And you say to Gwyn Davis and also Malcolm Rochford, Philip Heath is copied. You say, you're correct. The old process I recently tested unfortunately also failed. However, the new process would not have a chance. Whereas old process will self-extinguish, new process has proven itself in a vertical situation to continue to burn when the flame source is removed. We do have a paper trail that shows considerably better performance with old tech. However, this cannot be applied to steel frame facade situations, which is 80% of the market. I don't currently suggest we revert to old technology yet. Just give top priority to getting the OP90 trialled. Do you see that there?
Yeah.
And when you're referring to a paper trail showing considerably better performance for old tech K15 compared to the new tech, what are you referring to there?
I'm talking to analysis of the existing test data.
Yeah. So some of the documents I've just taken you to. Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about some email correspondence where you and Philip Heath were dealing with inquiries from Kingspan Offsite about the poor performance of K15 in June 2008 and following. If we can go to KIN 3020917, and if we look about halfway down page 2, with an email from Mark Stevens of Kingspan Offsite sent at 15:48 there at the bottom half of that page. He sends this on the 2nd of July to you and Philip Heath. And he says this, Ivor Phil, I'm concerned with the lack of response with regard to the performance of the K15 product on the BS 8414 tests that we have completed. I have a further 4 tests booked, as you're aware, and at this time I'm unsure of the way forward in terms of detailing the samples to pass the test. We have the samples built here at Sherburn, insulated with material from the same batch as the previous failed tests. Is the material appropriate to use on the future tests? Is the reason for the failure specific to a batch of K15, to the current formulation of K15, or to the details that we used? Is it normal for K15 to continue to burn for in excess of 30 minutes from the removal of the ignition source? Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, he's saying in those opening words, I'm concerned with the lack of response about the performance of K15. Had there been a lack of response to them about its performance at this point?
I think he may have called myself or Phil. I think I may have remembered, Phil said specifically that I'd need to pass anything through him. So I allowed Phil to deal with this. So, there might have been not an instant response.
These questions can't have come as a surprise to you, can they, given what you'd witnessed in the 2007-2008 tests?
Yeah, they're not a surprise, but it's a very complex story because there's a number of things going on here. There's the change in technology. There's the performance of the actual cladding element. You know, what type of cladding it was. Was it their aluminium cassette or their steel cassette or whatever it was? Also, we're trying to fix out the formulation that we're using at the time. I don't think I was involved in supplying the K15 that they used for this, so it was making sure that what batch that was.
Okay. If we look at the next email in the chain at the top of page 2, we can see that Philip Heath responds about just over an hour later at 16:52. He writes as follows. He says, Mark, as you're aware, there are always inconsistencies in relation to fire tests, both large and small scale. You have seen the results achieved by Kingspan insulation with regards to K15, both with a generic cladding and without cladding, and the result was similar, with the temperature of the thermocouples being within the guidelines of the standard. The burn pattern of the K15 was also identical in each instance, with no continuation of the burning seen in your test. As with all companies within the group, we are always striving to improve the performance of our products. With this in mind, we are currently waiting confirmation of the availability of formulation additive that we believe may improve the fire performance of K15. Our resin suppliers are working to understand the viscosity increase that may be seen with this addition to the formulation, which may or may not affect our processing. This being standard practice in resin manufacture in line with health and safety of chemical reactors. And then he says, basically, we're waiting confirmation of timescales and 2 months before we get a trial online. And then he says, with regards to the reason for failure, this is difficult for us to determine, especially having already had some success with BS 8414. I would suggest only the BRE technicians can confirm if it was due to the details that were adopted. You see that there. Now, can you remember discussing this response with Philip Heath? You're copied in there before it was sent.
I believe I would have discussed it. I might have even assisted with some of the, maybe the first couple of sentences. But the latter stuff with regards to the viscosity increase and the availability of resin, etc., that wouldn't have been something that came from me. But I'm sure, we would have discussed it, or he would have rung me up to say, look, hold fire, I'm answering this one, or...
Can you help us as to why he doesn't, in this email, make plain that the K15 product that they were testing was different to the K15 product tested in 2005. Isn't that a very important piece of information that Kingspan Offsite ought to be being told at this point?
I feel that Phil and myself at the time believed that there were so many complicated factors involved in this that, yes, there was a difference in the performance of the materials, but also there was a great deal of difference in the performance of the test when utilising different cladding systems.
Yeah.
We really didn't have a proper understanding at this point, and I don't think anyone in the industry had, as to what all the answers were. So I feel Phil's just holding back a little bit of information. Yes, it perhaps would have helped if he'd have, given him the full story, but...
Would you agree with me, if he was being open and transparent with Kingspan Offsite, they would have been told that the performance of the tests that he's referring to there, which are clearly the earlier tests on old K15, were on a different product? Do you agree with that, if he was being open and transparent?
Yeah, of course, yes.
If we scroll up to the next email in the chain, it's from you to Philip Heath on the 3rd of July 2008, so the next day. It's right at the bottom of that page. And you say this: help, I'm getting seriously grilled now based on this email. I'm currently on the phone. We need to ensure continuity of our answers, otherwise we will destroy our relationship and never be taken seriously again. Also, I may get accused of being a liar if we change our story. Are we saying that the product supplied, which failed their test, is the same product that we got to pass the test? I've been working closely with the BRE technicians, and they are currently helping us understand why old tech worked and new tech doesn't, and whether OD90 will have a chance. Obviously, the PF, the phenolic foam I have been supplying, is called A, B, and C. Therefore, they have minimal information. Do you see that there?
Yeah, so that was what I mentioned earlier, that I was very open with the BRE about we were changing technology because I was trying to glean as much information out of them. But obviously Phil would taken a different route with our sister company. So I felt that was compromising us even more.
Yeah. Did you ever get, can we just look at the body of the email again and have it in front of us while we're looking back on the other page? You ask a question in the third paragraph there: are we saying that the product supplies is the same product that we got to pass the test? Did you ever get a response to that? What was Philip Heath's response?
Who are you getting grilled by, I think that was his response. A bit of a political answer, isn't it?
Yeah. And when you say at the very bottom there, obviously the phenolic foam I've been supplying is called A, B, and C, do you mean that the phenolic foam you were supplying to Kingspan Offsite was called?
No, the phenolic foam I would supply to the BRE.
Yeah.
I would give them the production date, perhaps the production number, and I would say batch A, batch B, batch C.
I see. So you gave the BRE a lot of detail.
Yeah, you wouldn't say that batch A is the OP90 variant, batch B is the calcium carbonate variant or whatever. I wouldn't go into that sort of detail, but I would give them the production numbers, so at a later date they could trace those back.
But you weren't doing the same with Kingspan Offsite, is that what you're saying?
I think Kingspan Offsite would just supply K15.
And
I don't actually think, I think if I remember correctly, that they didn't involve us in the procurement of the materials for the test. They just took what they had as standard product out of their warehouse. And, there was a question as to how old that product was or whatever, but
yeah.
That's why I always wanted to be involved. Whenever we were supplying anything from a test, I wanted it to come from myself or my team, so we knew exactly what was sent.
Yeah.
Whether that was listed in the report or not, at least somebody knew what we'd actually tested, so we could glean the best we could out of the results.
Yeah. Yes, I think this culminates this chain in Philip Heath replying and saying, he's replied there, who you're getting grilled by, at the top of that page. And then he says, why don't you ask Kingspan Offsite to put their concerns in writing? So we can look at that just up at the top of that page. See if we can see that. Yeah, there at the top there, he says, forward emails and or ask them to put concerns in writing. Can we look now at an email from Aidan Wilkinson of Kingspan Offsite, dated the 16th of July 2008. This is KIN 403714. And it's the email at the bottom of page 1 at 9:58 on the 16th of July. And he writes in a similar vein as Mark Stevens from Kingspan Offsite, and he says this: hello Ivor, following the recent fire tests at the BRE, we are having the following concerns. After the heat source was extinguished, the K15 continued to burn on for a considerable time. In fact, it was in excess of 30 minutes. It was only extinguished when the BRE applied water to it at the end of the 1 hour duration. The heat source had been extinguished at 22 minutes. Is this what is expected of this material? Is it normal for K15 to continue to burn for in excess of 30 minutes after the removal of the ignition source? Is the reason for the failure specific to a batch of K15, to the current formulation, etc.? We are concerned with the lack of response with regard to the performance of the K15 product on the BS8414 test that we have completed. We have a further 4 tests booked, as you're aware, and at this time we're unsure of the way forward in terms of detailing the samples to pass the test. You see that. Now, it's over 2 weeks now since Mark Stevens has sent a very similar email and Philip Heath had replied. And if we look at the next email above, on the same day, it's from Philip Heath, who writes to you and Malcolm Rochford. If we could look at this, he says, good evening, we need to be careful how we answer the concerns of Offsite. Any suggestions? Do you see that there?
Yes.
And did you understand this comment to be in relation to not letting Offsite find out that the K15 they were using was new technology K15, which could not repeat the test results of old technology K15?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Yes, it was whether you understood that comment to be in relation to not letting Offsite find out that the K15 they tested was new technology K15. Is that why he's saying we need to be careful how we answer the concerns of Offsite?
I think he didn't want us to put anything in writing that they could use as justification for not using phenolic foam in any of their cladding systems. He was just being cautious. It's not black and white as to whether new technology is considerably worse than old technology in a rain screen test. There are so many other factors. Yes, it's marginally worse, but when you're looking at different cladding systems, etc., there are so many factors that become involved.
Can we look at KIN 408844? And if we go to page 2, about halfway down, we see the same email from Philip Heath we just looked at about the need to be careful. And then we get your response above that, starting at the bottom of page 1 and over to page 2. If we can just look at the bottom of page 1, just to see that. It's on the 17th of July, 11:29, right at that bottom. And then if we go over, we can see that you say, Aidan is pushing me for a meeting so we can work together on getting a pass for Offsite. This collective work could be of great benefit, but first we need to agree what can be disclosed. And then you say, I've inserted some answers below, however, believe we should tread very carefully here. by Offsite going all out for LPCB approval with their first tests, i.e. fully witnessed, has not been wise, and this move could be responsible for a lot of the questions we are now getting from industry. And then you say, I think we should at least discount the product previously supplied as an especially bad batch, however. And then you go on and you talk about what you can see in the video on that test. Now, you're saying early on in that email that we've got to agree what can be disclosed. Who was deciding what should be disclosed to Kingspan Offsite at this time?
Well, I would say my line manager, Phil, was driving. Everything had to be passed through him.
Yeah.
So, but I was simply just throwing ideas at the wall here because I've got a relationship with Offsite as well. I needed those things to be resolved so I could move forward, because I saw the body of evidence that was being created by Offsite as a great benefit to Kingspan installation, because this could be helped to push for XAP details with the BRE.
Right.
So I wanted the issue boxed out as soon as possible, or bottomed out, sorry.
Yeah. Can you help us understand the sentence there about the questions Kingspan were getting from industry? You're obviously concerned that people have fully witnessed that test and it's not been wise. You say this move could be responsible for a lot of the questions we're now getting from industry. That's in that second paragraph.
Right.
What
was the date of this again?
So it's the 17th of July 2008.
I think there was a lot of systems. Rainscreen was really kind of taking off. Well, we were seeing it take off. I'd say our competitors were becoming aware of it, and they were, pushing back at Kingspan for, trying to, just push back, ask lots of questions. People were trying to get hold of reports on the sly.
Were they questions about the suitability of K15 for use over 18 metres?
Of course there were, yes.
And how were those questions being answered by Kingspan at this time?
My understanding at the time was that we were simply presenting the information that we had as this is what we have to verify its suitability of use, but you need to go out and seek verification with your appropriate building engineer, fire engineer, or and the other component suppliers, because we could only show that our product had the ability to perform. It didn't perform in all scenarios.
Why do you say in that second paragraph that it was not wise for Offsite's tests on systems including K15 to have been fully witnessed? What was there to hide?
Okay, when you go for certification, I explained this earlier, but you, rather than the manufacturer just send the product to the laboratory and the laboratory test it and just record the batch number, etc., the laboratory would often send somebody to the manufacturer. They'd witness the production run. They'd make a note of the standard operating procedure. They'd probably sign the product, and then they would, once it's delivered to the test house, they would check that the signature was the same, that the seal hadn't been removed or whatever. That would then be verifying that what the manufacturer was producing was the same as what they tested. So then they trace that back when they visit the factory on further dates. So, my concern there was it's not wise because Kingspan hadn't bottomed out the formulation issues at that point.
Right. I.e. what K15 could be used to pass these full-scale fire tests, yeah?
Yeah, or how K15 was configured, really.
Right. I see. But just to be clear, K15 was being sold at this time, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Now, if we go back to the chain KIN 403714 and look on page 1, we can see at 9:19, Malcolm Rochford says to you and Philip Heath and Vincent Coppock, He says this: I think the best response at the moment is to say that we're investigating possible reasons for the failure and we'll come back to them as soon as we're clearer on what caused it. Meanwhile, we recommend they do not test the other material they have used to fabricate the installations, as that was the same batch and may suffer from a similar problem. If necessary, I suppose we could send old formulation material for the testing if you think this has a better chance and they are pressing. But this is undesirable for several reasons. I'd rather delay and get the new FR product made as soon as Hestia can supply material, which we are waiting on. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So is that what occurred, that effectively you delayed with Kingspan Offsite while you tried to work out whether there was a better FR K15 product that could be developed?
I think that was how it went down, yes.
Can we look now at a document from April 2008? This is KIN 403698. This is your monthly report for the technical department that you sent to Philip Heath, it would appear. If you look at the top, report period, 4th of April 2008 by Ivor Meredith. Sorry, can I just clarify? I should have put that as a question. Is this the monthly report for the technical department that you sent to Philip Heath?
It's my monthly report, yes.
Yeah. And then if we go in the third bullet down and look at on this page, we can see there's a paragraph that says this: indicative calorimeter tests on new K15 versus old have shown a quicker time to ignition and double the heat output for the newer product, thus confirming initial suspicions in respect of reaction to fire. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So by now you've done some calorimeter tests on new K15, is that right?
Yes, I've done some on the new K15 at that time. I've done some testing at Ixova, I believe.
And this information was being shared with all of the technical team in Kingspan, or just
This
Philip
would have been
Heath?
shared with the technical meeting, which was the sort of director level technical meeting, yeah.
And this information was known before the Kingspan offsite tests, yes?
Without seeing the reports, I wouldn't be able to see the exact times.
Okay.
I mean, it was always something I had a suspicion of. It was just I had more concrete evidence to present to my my line managers.
If we now go to the monthly report for July 2008, KIN 408848. This is the Technical Services monthly report for July 2008. Would this have been written by you as well?
No, this would have been done by Andrew Pack or Matthew Evans.
Right, okay. But would you have received this Technical Services Department monthly report?
I would have received a copy, yeah.
Yeah. If we go to page 2, under the heading Projects, at the bottom, we see...
Okay, yeah, I think I would write that section and send it to Andrew Pack, who would include that in his... I think it's just an abbreviated form of what I send to Phil, actually.
Yeah, I see. And it says there, immediately under Projects, a sample of the OP90 fire retardant phenolic has been sent to the BRE for indicative calorimetry testing. We hope to find a lower calorific output and slower time to ignition. A product with these characteristics is required to maintain our position in the high-rise facade market above 18 metres. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So what you're hoping to do now is some calorimetry testing on a product with some form of fire retardant in it. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes. I'm hoping there, because of the frustrations with getting EXAP rules out of the BRE, we're looking at small-scale bench-sized tests that we can use to prove that the new variant is of similar performance to the old technology.
Yeah. As far as you were aware, was Malcolm Rochfort aware of this kind of information So about the calorific output and time to ignition of new technology K15, and also what you were hoping to achieve with the fire retardant version.
Yes.
What about any managers further up the hierarchy? Was anybody beyond Malcolm Rochford aware, as far as you knew, of the different fire performance of the K15, new technology K15?
I wasn't given many chances to mix with the hierarchy above Malcolm. And like I say, I was accused of being negative, so I kind of sat on my hands a little bit when I was around them. So I'm sure they were aware. I'm sure Malcolm would have voiced these opinions.
Were you ever a party to or told about any discussions taking place regarding stopping sales of K15 due to life safety issues, given how it's performing in fire by this time?
I think I remember a discussion with one of the Irish sales directors. I don't know if it was Alan or Ralph or somebody like that. I'm not sure, but I remember having them coming at me and discussing this.
And what did you discuss?
I put my concerns forward. You know, they asked if it was right, and I said yes.
If what was right, and what were you saying yes to?
Well, if my opinion was that the fire performance had degraded.
Yeah. And can you give us an idea when you had that discussion?
I'd be very,
Okay.
yeah, couldn't place that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I remember having it, but the date.
Now, I want to look at what the BBA position was at this time. You've said, and for the transcript, this is at paragraph 61 of your witness statement on page 28, that to be generally accepted in industry by the big insurers, including the NHBC, Zurich, etc., having a BBA certificate is essential. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
And was a BBA certificate also essential for working on sites used by the public, such as schools or hospitals, or in order to be considered for housing associations and local authority projects?
I think a BBA certificate is a general green light of acceptability. I don't know what the specifics are with those types, but I would have thought it gives confidence to any buyer when they see that badge.
Yeah. Once it was awarded, how did the BBA certificate influence the sales of K15?
I wouldn't know the sales figures,
Okay.
to be honest.
Now, you explain in your witness statement, and we'll be asking him about this, that is it right that Gareth Mills had the primary role for obtaining the BBA certificate for K15? Is that right?
He was the key contact at that time.
Yeah.
And if he had issues, he would come to myself or Tony, I think it was then.
Now, if we go to the first issue of the BBA certificate on the 27th of October 2008, if we look at this is BBA 6038. So here we have it. We can see from the bottom left-hand part of the page that it says date of first issue 27th of October 2008. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then starting with the first page in their section headed key factors assessed section, there we've got it in that page, that's great there. We can see there it's got thermal performance, etc., another thing, and then we have behaviour in relation to fire, third heading down. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says this, the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire or present a smoke or toxic hazard, see section 7. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, leaving aside the smoke and toxic hazard for now, can you tell me what those words mean? What does it mean when it says will not contribute to the development stages of a fire?
It's very ambiguous. It depends what test,
Well, quite.
what situation. To be honest, I think it's historical. It's a historical statement which might be in all the Cooltherm BBA certificates.
Right. Do you understand that assertion to be based on some sort of actual test standard or test methodology or data?
I think it's a historical statement that was probably predates my involvement with the BBA.
Right. When you first read this certificate, can you remember when that was?
I would have been on a circulation for proofreading it, but our involvement was literally proofreading. We would give test evidence to the BBA. They would come into the factory, produce audits. They were the specialists. They were the ones that were writing this certificate. We just basically had to, most of the time, go along with what they were saying.
When you read it, did you believe that to be correct, given everything you knew by October 2008 about the way it performed in fire?
I guess I don't know what I don't know what the development stages of a fire are.
I see.
In respect to that, they've obviously got that out of somewhere, some test report where they've thought that was acceptable to include. But I don't know where they've gleaned that from, to be honest.
Would you agree, looking at it now, that it sounds very much like a description of a non-combustible product? That's the impression it's trying to give.
No, it's a thermoset material. It's not going to run, melt or drip, and they do char at the earlier stages of the fire, and they have been shown to prevent further burning. So I believed it was a plausible statement, but like I say, it was one of the, I will admit to around this time I was that bombarded by work, I might have not looked at one of these things properly.
I see.
But I don't feel it's to do with a non-combustible incident. I just think it's a very, it's something that's come out of a test report, and they've used it throughout all the Cooltherm certificates, I believe.
Let's look at section 7 now, at the bottom of page 5. This is the section which deals in detail with K15's performance in relation to fire. We just go in and zoom up on that. At 7.1, there is a description of the system tested to BS 8414 in May 2005. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So we can see it's got 6mm thick cement particle boards mechanically fixed in the second line there.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we look at the end of the description of the system tested to 8414, at the end of the third line from the bottom, we can see it says this: within the stated test time, the temperature at the level 2 thermocouples did not exceed 600 degrees C, therefore displaying limited fire spread away from the fire source, and that the product meets the criteria stated within BRE 135. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do.
Now, would you agree, looking at this now, that simply can't be correct, because a product can't meet the criteria stated within BRE 135, can it?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's a system test, so it's the whole system that met the criteria, not that product. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Can you help as to why that point wasn't raised with the BBA prior to publication of this certificate, so that that was clarified so as to be accurate?
The BBA allow us to check the BBA certificate. It's a courtesy, really. They give us, that they send a preprint draft, and they say you've got 24 hours before we publish this. I think so. We've got to quickly look at it in that time and go back to them and say, yeah, that's okay. And we'll quickly make sure that a lot of the references are correct. And to be honest, I'm so busy, and I'll admit to probably not looking at this properly in the time.
But it could be corrected even after it's issued, couldn't it? If it's inaccurate, you could speak to the BBA and say, actually, we've realised that's simply not correct. It doesn't all have to be before.
Yeah, in hindsight, maybe this was something that should have been done, yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I can be permitted to do so, and if the witness is able to, I'd just like, in 10 minutes, just finish this topic, if that's okay. We have got a lot to cover with this witness.
How do you feel, Mr. Meredith? Can you keep going for another 10 minutes?
Just about, yeah.
Yes. It's been a long day, I know. Right.
That's very kind, thank you.
Right.
Now, shortly after the release of the BBA certificate for K15, Kingspan were contacted by George Lee of the BBA about the wording in the certificate. Do you recall that?
I have some recollection of that going on, yeah.
I want to look at an email chain which was not copied to you originally but was forwarded to you on the 5th of March 2008 by Philip Heath. If we can go to KIN 409103 and look at the bottom email in the second half of page 1. This is George Lee on the 24th of December 2008 at 9:50. And he writes, we've recently received a number of comments on the K15 certificate in relation to the clarity of wording used as part of this certificate fire section. In response to this, we have a suggested amendment to the text which we wish to make. This amendment we will make at no cost to yourselves and has as an improvement to the certificate, which I hope you will agree will improve how this certificate will be read in the future. And then you can see, if you look at the second bullet, he says the changes I propose are as follows, and in that second bullet, under key factors assessed, he says it's going to say behaviour in relation to fire. The boards are classified as class 0. The boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire. The product has been tested to BS 84141 for a specific construction on masonry walls. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So they're wanting to add in that the product has been tested for a specific construction on masonry walls. Did you consider there to be anything inaccurate in that proposed amendment when you were made aware of it? It was entirely accurate and appropriate, wasn't it?
So he's going to include the boards will not contribute to the development stage of the fire. He's keeping that in.
Yeah, but then he said the product's been tested to BS 84141 for a specific construction on masonry walls.
It's a fair comment. That's correct.
Yeah, that sentence that they're adding is correct, isn't it?
No issues with those.
Yeah. Going up the email chain, we can see Philip Heath doesn't respond to Mr. Lee until the 5th of March 2009 at 14:47. So over 10 weeks later, Mr. Heath responds. Can you help us as to why it might have taken 10 weeks to respond to that request by the BBA to amend the certificate?
I know Phil was very busy. I know I complain about how busy I was, but Phil was a lot busier. But then it says here that Phil's saying let the file gather dust. I think he was in no rush to respond.
Yes, I'm going to come to that. But you can't think of a specific reason other than that he was busy as to why it would have taken him so long to respond to the BBA?
I think, was the previous email directed to Phil or was it Gareth that included?
I think it was directed to him. No, he writes to Mr. Mills, you're right.
Yeah.
He writes to Gareth Mills.
I mean, Gareth could have sat with that for a while as well. I don't quite know what happened there, but...
If we look at what he says, good afternoon, George. Gareth Mills has brought to my attention your recent emails in relation to our BBA certificate for K15. Firstly, may we register our concern at the proposal to reissue this certificate so soon after publication when we have waited some considerable time for its issue. Secondly, your request is receiving our attention. However, we are determining the implications to Kingspan of this speedy reissue as documentation has been published that refers to the current certificate and the wording therein. Therefore, there could be cost implications to Kingspan that we would have no option but to pass on the BBA. if we are in agreement to your request. Once we've completed our audit to determine the implications for Kingspan insulation, we will be back to you. Regards, Philip. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then we can see that 2 minutes later, at the top of that page, so he sends the email to George Leon at 14:47, and 2 minutes later, he sends an email to you, Andrew Pack, Gareth Mills. Let the file gather dust, guys. Regards, Phil. What did you take that to mean?
Well, he doesn't want us to worry about it. It's just, it's Gareth's action to move that forward, but let's just, let the file gather dust, as it says. It's, there's no rushing back to George Lee on this one.
No.
I mean, they used to take an incredible amount of time to produce a certificate, and then, then they grabbed hold of this and wanted to do changes immediately. So they're quite frustrating to work with, really. But then that's just.
He doesn't say in his email, Gareth, this one's for you to action. Everyone else, you can let the file gather dust, does he? It's a general instruction, isn't it? And wouldn't you have taken it that way?
Yeah. Well, he's suggesting that nobody work on it, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you take that as a clear instruction from Philip Heath to stall?
Yeah, certainly.
And did you stall?
I was not directly involved in the BBA anyway, although it came sort of under my umbrella. It was that important to the business that it was reported up above me all the time. So
yeah. You said in your witness statement, when you asked questions about Kingspan employing any policy or strategy of delay between 2008 and 2016 in relation to K15, you said that there was no strategy or policy of delay. Now, looking at this now, would you agree that this is an example of where...
this is an example of something I overlooked when I answered my witness statement, yeah.
Yeah. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Why was Kingspan not prepared for the BBA to make it clear to the public that there were restrictions on the use of K15 over 18 metres?
Because it could limit sales.
Yeah. Philip Heath wanted the file to gather dust because it was in Kingspan's commercial interests to keep the then version of the BBA certificate in play, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Did you find it concerning at the time that your superior, your line manager, was dismissing the concerns of a respected certification body in terms of fire safety and accuracy over fire safety? Were you concerned about that?
I've raised my concerns on numerous occasions about this kind of thing. So, you get to a point where, you get embroiled in the culture of a business, and it just becomes second nature, I think.
And how would you describe that culture at Kingspan?
They were assertive, going after sales. They had a lot of momentum. There's a lot of people there that were very devoted to the business. They were, it was my first job. I thought they were a great company to work for.
And were they assertive at going after sales, even in the face of life safety problems with their product?
I mean, nobody could have seen what could have happened, really. In hindsight, this is all terrible, but not that. Then it was just more sales, I believe.
But to ask my question again, were they assertive at going after sales, even though realising that there were life safety issues with their product?
I think looking at the information and the evidence now, yes.
Well, do you recall any conversation with any of the senior managers which gave you the impression that they were aware of the dangers but didn't really mind about them?
I remember having a conversation with one of the Irish directors who came to me with his concerns, but I had to sort of point him in the direction of my boss, because I was, like what happened with Offsite, it wasn't my level to discuss that with him in a way.
No.
I discussed the issues with my immediate superiors.
Thank you.
And who was that Irish director? Just one last question.
I don't know if it was Ralph Mannion or Alan Scupan. I can't remember.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for that indulgence.
Right, thank you. All right, that's great, thank you. Well, I think we have done enough for today, Mr. Meredith, so we'll stop there. I'm going to have to ask you to come back for some more questions tomorrow, I'm afraid, but I think you were expecting that anyway. So we'll resume at 10 o'clock, please. And again, please don't discuss your evidence or anything to do with it while you're away. All right?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. 10 o'clock tomorrow, please.